Mayo is a county that's filled with sites of historical significance, but while the megalithic sites and the ancient ruins are fascinating, some of the most impressive examples are in the form of grand country houses found in the towns, villages and the depths of the countryside. So let's walk back in time and discover Mayo's historical houses and gardens. Our tour starts at a rambling estate, McGlade Castle, a 13th century property on the banks of the River Moy. This historic house now serves as a boutique hotel run by Paul Doran.
You're very welcome here at McGlade Castle this morning. And I'm going to give you a little bit of the story of McGlade Castle from its inception. And that was in 1825, when a man called Francis Knox Gore, who was young, wealthy. When I tell you that the family in the next decade or so owned 30,000 acres in Mayo and up into Sligo. So that's some kind of wealth as a landowner. Well, at that time, he was the Lord Lieutenant of Sligo. So he could choose anywhere within that acreage to build. Ballina was just becoming a busy town. And as you'll have already seen, you've got the artery of the River Moy. So this is an elevated site. So we wanted his family home to be on an elevated site overlooking the beautiful Moy and have fantastic gardens. So he got a prestigious young architect who was called Joseph Benjamin Keane to design what was fashionable at that time, and that was to look back to bygone years. So outside, when you see the pictures of McGlade, you'll see a revival style. It's called the New Gothic Tudor. What they did was they used the river to bring Moyne limestone. It was cut and then dressed. That means it's smoothed off. And when you think of it at the time without electricity and everything like that, to produce what we've got here, it was magnificent. So outside, everything was looking back. Inside, they wanted modern. So when you see the unique features like here in the Great Hall, the ceilings, the fireplaces, they could import. At that time, people, if you look at the ordinary way of life, like in the National Museum, you'll see people didn't move very far and they used what was outside their doors for living. But as we go into another room, we'll see an Italian marble fireplace with their coat of arms. So this was immense wealth. And when I say to you, you wouldn't get within an ass's roar, that means that you and I wouldn't be here today. I now help curate the collection downstairs that we'll see later and also do a guide of the history of the house. But I wouldn't be here if I was living. I probably wouldn't even be alive at my age back then. So now we're looking forward in time to 1845. Most of you would realise that's the time of the Great Famine. And at that time, McGlade estate was said to be the finest in Connacht. So great wealth still. And to the side of me, you'll notice that fireplace I was talking to you about. Behind me, you can see the fantastic French style chandelier. So that's interesting because if you had one candle, you looked after it at that time. But look at the amount of light they had and the size of the windows too in this withdrawing room.
The house was later purchased by the Beckett family, who intended on converting the manor house into a stud farm, but later sold the house. During the 1950s, the house was used as a hospital and military barracks, but it was brought back to its former glory by a man named Jack Fenn.
A man who was born as Jack Fenn, and you'll hear that name later, later changed his name to Marshal Duran because he ran away to sea as a young man, was a merchant naval seaman in England and then in America, but he bought the name Marshal Duran to get that far. He was born in 1916 when people weren't expected to have different careers. They stayed with one, but his motto was eat life before it eats you. And he wasn't going to get it out there, and he was going to do everything that he could, something that people are advised to do today. So by middle age, he'd made himself a lot of money as a hotelier, and he was on holiday and saw the opportunity to buy a castle. So that's what he went ahead and did, and took 10 years then, carefully using his skills with a team of people to preserve and conserve what was left of the features of Ballyk. But alongside that, well, he knew he was going to open it as a hotel, and Ballyk at that time didn't have a BAR, no bar. So that was going to have to happen, and he had found out that the Armada had a long time history with this coast, and he was a sailor and a diver. So what did he do? He went and investigated, and he found wreckage. He went and actually to Strida Strand in County Sligo and brought back some artefacts from the Armada and continued to develop an idea of a bar. And what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the Armada bar that he designed.
A guided tour of Ballyk Castle and the Marshall Durand collection is a unique museum experience. Visitors can also view one of the finest collections of Jurassic fossils, medieval weapons and medieval armour. Visitors can also see the Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen's bed, the last wolf shot in Connacht and other curiosities.
So as I mentioned before, we do the history of Ballyk Castle upstairs with the Knox door, but the highlight of the tour for many people is the Marshall Durand collection, and that's what we're going to look at now. So we're right down in the vaults of Ballyk Castle, where at the zenith of the wealth of the Knox Gore, the servants would have lived. And this would have been a great place to live because it would have been warm, it would have been much larger than you would have had at home, and you'd have been a secure place with your own fireplace and your own window. Think of that as we're going through here.
Here in Ballyk Castle, a warm welcome awaits you. Stay in one of our 10 boutique-style rooms. Each room boasts a 4-poster bed, period deco and antiques throughout. Guests can relax in our Armada bar and enjoy a drink, dine in our award-winning Jack Finn's restaurant, take a stroll down to our beautiful woods, or take a guided tour of the Marshall Durand collection. Since 2016, we have been members of the prestigious Blue Book. Whatever the season, a warm welcome awaits you here in Ballyk Castle.
There are many historical features from bygone days to unearth at Ballyk Woods, including a hermitage site. But for Mayo footballer Ger Cafferty, it's about childhood memories.
Yeah, it was an amazing place to grow up. This was our back garden. I think you only really appreciate it when you move away for a while and you're living somewhere else and you feel like going to a wood or going to a place like this for a walk or for a bit of tranquility, a bit of thinking time, and there's nowhere really to go. I think someone told me it's the largest urban woodland in Europe. So people of Ballina are extremely lucky, and I think we're just learning about the wood again. It was an amazing place growing up, say when I was really young, and my mother and my neighbour Granny Melvin used to bring me and my friends for walks through the woods, and it was just like you can see around here there's little fairy trails and bluebells, and it just sparks off the imagination and get that tranquility. The only people you're going to bump into is a squirrel or a bird. The only thing you're going to hear is a bit of bird. There's no traffic, no noise, no hassle. It just gives you that bit of time to think and relax in space.
This beautiful and historic castle is set within 1,000 acres of woodland on the banks of the River Moy, and over the years has become a hugely popular venue for weddings. So the next time you're visiting the west of Ireland, why not stop off in North Mayo and visit this historic castle? As well as enjoying the many historical houses and gardens, visitors can escape, explore and enjoy the many other attractions in the county. Here's Anna Connor, Mayo Tourism Officer with Mayo County Council.
Mayo as a county has so much to offer visitors and tourists and locals alike. We have an expansive coastline and we're, I suppose, proudly presented midway along the wide Atlantic Way. We have the longest section of coastline than any other county in the country, and we have so much to offer in terms of our outdoor offering, in terms of the attractions and the activities. But from our research, one of the key attractions and one of the key experiences that we have is a network of historic houses and gardens. Some of these houses and gardens have a lot to offer. They have different types of offering within the grounds or within the estate of each respective estate. To give you an example, the wonderful Westport House has the house itself. It has the bay, it has the greenway network traversing through it, it has a network of walking trails, and it has a huge kiddie outdoor adventure park. We have Moore Hall, and again, that has been recently refurbished. It's over 80 acres. There's a network of trails there also, along with wooden sculptures, which entertains children and lots of users and visitors. In addition to that, we have Innisco House, where there's a national loop walk, there's mature gardens, you have the house as accommodation, and there's so much more to offer there. We have Mount Falcon and we have Beleek Woods, and again, all offering a unique offering. We're so lucky to have all of these wonderful attractions and wonderful houses and gardens on our doorstep. And we in the tourism department within Mayo County Council are really enthused, from our research, particularly with the culturally curious segment. They're all wanting to experience cultural attractions and heritage attractions. And with all of these attractions, we have it in an abundance, and we're able to mix the great outdoors with the houses. So it's definitely a unique selling offering, and we think we have it all here in abundance, and it's definitely a huge addition to the overall offering that the county has to offer.
Join us after the break as we continue our journey visiting Mayo's wonderful historic houses and gardens. Beautiful Innisco House dates back to the 1790s and is tucked into the woodlands at the base of Mount Nathan. The house has been in the family since the 1650s. The house is now occupied by Susan Kellett and her son DJ.
This part of the house is what we call the new house, which was built in the 1790s. The original house, the back of the house was about 1740s, and indeed there's an earlier house, but we don't actually know where it is. It was somewhere on the grounds. So we've been here for a long time. We're standing in the drawing room, which, as I said, was a part of the house built on in the 1790s, but the wallpaper here was put on in the 1850s. And the plasterwork would date from about the 1790s. So I came back. I was away, of course, at school and college and things like that, and I came back in the 1980s. My parents, my father had inherited this house from a cousin in the 1950s, but had never managed to live here full time. And he used to say that he earned the money in Dublin to lose it in Mayo, because keeping a house like this and with just a certain amount of farmland, there's only about 200 acres left now. It certainly wasn't easy. So when I came back, I decided that the property had to be opened up, and it had to be, we had to have far more of the local community coming in and making use of it. And so the business I started in the house with 6 bedrooms was doing dinner, bed and breakfast, and that got us started. And we now have the ornamental garden was restored under the Great Gardens of Ireland programme in the 1990s, and the other garden which is now leased to the Heritage Centre, which is a community development company, is now an organic garden, and in fact is one of the oldest in Ireland. It's been organic for over 25 years.
This is my family home. I'm the 13th generation here of my family. There's a couple of very interesting things in this room. For instance, the portrait of Major Mervyn Pratt. He was the last of the Pratt family here, and he passed away in 1950. He was my grandfather's first cousin on my mother's side, and he fought in the Boer War and World War I alongside his brother. Probably one of the best love stories about Ennisco is actually going back to 1798, the year of the French. The French army under General Humbert, who landed in Killala, marched on the way to Castlebar, actually stopped here for a period of time. It's one of the ways that we can actually date this part of the house. We know it started construction in 1796 and it was completed in 1798. How we know this is that the French army used the wooden scaffolding of the newly completed house to create bonfires for the army out on our lawns here. The officers of the army actually were in the house and they were in this room. Now it's very debatable how long they stayed here. Some people say a few hours, some people say overnight. What we do know is that they took all the food, they took all the horses, and while they were here they drank half the wine cellar. And the story goes is they marched on the British in Castlebar, and it was the only battle they won in the entire campaign, and that, as we all know, became known as the Races of Castlebar. So when they won that battle, they sent back for the remainder of the wine cellar here, saying that this was the only place in North Mayo that they found good wine.
The visitors come here, come from all over the world, but of course principally with Irish visitors from the UK, and a lot of Americans, because we do have a family history research unit here in the Heritage Centre, which is in one of the farmyards behind the house, and they come to do family history research. Others come to enjoy the peace and quiet, staying in a historic house, go fishing on the lake, and so on. And some years ago we were able to open a looped walk around the property, so people can come in, park their cars and walk down to the lake and all through the woodlands.
Ennisco House is one of the last great houses in North Mayo. They're becoming fewer and fewer as time goes on, just in terms of the upkeep of them. That's why I love sharing the house to guests and the community around us, because these houses, they almost attract history. History happens around them. I'm the 13th generation of my family here, and hopefully it will continue on for generations to come. The 14th generation just had her 3rd birthday a few days ago.
The future looks bright for the last great house of North Mayo, who are working closely with the Department of Parks and Wildlife to bring a rare Irish breed of cattle, the Irish Moyle, to the farmlands of Ennisco House. Heading to South Mayo now, where the story of another great house, Moore Hall, is truly fascinating.
When you're talking about Moore Hall, of course it's in Mayo, but it originated in Mayo because the original builder, George the Builder as we call him, they came from Strayed. The family came from Strayed originally, and went during the penal laws, or prior to the penal laws, went to Spain and made their money in Alicante. Now, I've been to Alicante and I've seen the warehouses that the Moors built, and they had a wine and brandy trade going. Now, they made a fortune in Spain on the wine and brandy trade. I'd say a lot of it was smuggled back to Mayo, various ways and various means, but they had ships and warehouses in Alicante, made a fortune, and were so wealthy that they were recognised in the Spanish court. Now, the penal laws were relaxed in the late 18th century, and the Moors always hankered to get back to Mayo. And in around 1790, they began searching for a piece of property, now extensive property. So eventually they came home with £200,000 sterling at the time. Now, I don't know what it's worth these days, but it's a fortune. They bought 12,000 acres of land in South Mayo and built Moore Hall, or started building Moore Hall House in 1792. Now, it took 3 years to build. So they didn't get into the house until 1795. They had been warned that they were building on a fairy hill and that tragedy would follow the family. And of course, tragedy did follow the family in various guises down through the years.
The Moore family suffered their fair share of ill luck after settling on the shores of Lough Carra. George Moore himself died at the age of 70, having gone blind from an earlier stroke. His son John Moore, a lawyer and Irish nationalist, died aged 32 while in captivity. However, George Henry Moore, who had a great interest in horses and racing, was to become a hero during the Irish famine.
This George, again, another George, took a horse that was in the stables in Moore Hall, a cart horse or a stage horse or a coach horse, and brought this horse to the Gold Cup in England. And of course the horse won the race, came in at 100 to 1. Everyone in Moore Hall, of course, had a few bob on him, and I suppose half of Mayo as well that got the story. But the horse was called Corana, and he won the Chester Gold Cup. Now, Moore made a fortune on it. He took the bookie, he cleaned the bookies out. But it's remembered of the Moores that at that stage they brought 5,000 tons of grain into Westport on the Martha Washington and distributed this to all the people who were suffering close to the famine times or in the famine times. The house was occupied up until about 1910, and then it was occupied and not occupied, where George was living in Dublin or in London. And Morris, his brother, Morris Moore, Colonel Morris Moore, he was living there for a while, and George, the writer who owned the place, didn't get on with his brother, and eventually they fell out altogether, and the house then became unoccupied, I suppose. And in in the Civil War, in January of 1920, the house was burned by the old IRA, who feared that it was going to be taken over as a garrison for the treaty forces. And that's why the house is, as it is today, a ruin, except that there's a lot of people going to do something about it, I think, now.
I and many others recognise the extraordinary potential that this place had for well over 30 years. As you know, it has extraordinary historical significance for the area, both cultural, literary, political. The council purchased the house that you can see here behind us and approximately 80 acres of surrounding land. Now, so much excitement generated by the purchase that the council found it necessary, and indeed they see great confidence in the future. So in that context, a major plan has been devised. It's called the Master Plan, and that has been done in consultation with the National Parks and Wildlife, Mayo County Council and Culture. Overwhelming consensus is that Moore Hall will never be completed, the project will never be completed without a restoration of this house behind me. And that's certainly on the agenda. There's also a plan for external trails linking Moore Hall with Tower Hill from where some of the in-laws came. George Henry Moore's wife was Moore from Tower Hill. And it's also envisaged that a boat trip would be provided from Moore Hall right to Ballintrub Abbey. That's a 6-mile one-way, 12-mile return. And en route, one can visit the burial place of the famous novelist George Moore, who was buried in Castle Island, which is now called Moore's Island. That could very well be a very interesting stop.
That brings us to the end of part 1 of Mayo's Historical Houses and Gardens in association with Mayo.ie. Join us again next week for part 2. Mayo is a county that's filled with sites of historical significance, but while the megalithic sites and the ancient ruins are fascinating, some of the most impressive examples are in the form of grand country houses found in the towns, villages and the depths of the countryside. So let's walk back in time and discover Mayo's historical houses and gardens. In part 2 we continue our tour of Mayo's historical houses and gardens. Mount Falcon is situated between Ballina and Foxford. The magnificent restored property is on a 100-acre estate dating back to the 1870s and has been beautifully restored.
Well, you're very welcome to Mount Falcon. As you can see, this magnificent house, it's got a relatively long history. It's about 140 years old. It reflected a marriage between two of the English landlord families here. predominantly the Knox family, who were big landowners in Sligo and Mayo. And their son, Uhtred Knox, was marrying one of the daughters from another eminent manor house here in Ballina called Billy Castle. And this house symbolised a wedding, literally. It was designed by a very famous architect, James Franklin Fuller. He's very well known around Ireland for some of probably his best buildings, Calmore Abbey being one, Tinnakeely, Farmley, Park Nasilla. He was an ecclesiastical architect, and that's why you get that strong Gothic influence through the architecture. They started building it in 1869, and it took them 7 years, would you believe? A fortune, certainly in those days in the west of Ireland, £3,650. The original estate here in Monfalcone expanded most of the land between Foxford and Ballina, most of the Moy Valley here. Originally would have extended to 2,212 acres. So that was the history of the house being built. It was built as a home for this young couple and their family. They subsequently sold it in 1932 to an extraordinary gentleman. He was a retired captain in the British Army, a guy by the name of Robert Aldridge. And himself and his wife Connie, they bought it. At that stage, the Land Commission had broken up the estate. There was approximately 300 acres when they bought it. They had it as a private residence, and after the Major died in 1972, Connie, Constance being her full name, she opened it up as a guest house. It was a small guest house with 9 bedrooms in it. I literally bought it from her in 2002. I came down here, I packed up my career. I had been living up in Dublin and working in finance up in Dublin, but I'm originally from Mayo, at least my father's family are from Mayo. And I had the pleasure of spending my alternate childhood summers working on my uncle's farms here. This is Monfalcone. We bought it in 2002. When I say we, my brothers have supported me with this project. I bought it in 2002, came down here, I lived in the house on my own for 3 years, planning the development as you effectively see it today. There's 12,000 square foot in the original house, which I restored painstakingly. You can see that around all the original features in the house. There's a 38,000 square foot extension to make it into a viable hotel. And I developed 45 lodges around the estate. I'd like to think they're done very sensitively, you wouldn't even know they're here. The Victorians were the greatest architects, and what makes Monfalcone, the context of the setting. This magnificent house was built in the most extraordinary setting. 100 acres of parkland. We have 197 species of trees here, as you can see. And at the end of the day, that's what provides the context for the house.
There is plenty of opportunity to golf and fish while enjoying your stay at Monfalcone. It's situated on the banks of the River Moy, often referred to as being the most productive salmon fishery in Western Europe.
So we get a lot of people who come with the main motive of those two activities. And there's strong correlations between golfing and fishing. That's why we get a lot of well-known golfers that come here. I mean, Mark O'Mara, frequent visitor, Tiger Woods, Scott McCarron, Joaquin Eggman, Darren Clark, Nick Faldo. They all come here. A lot of people think they're just coming for the golf. They're not. They are fishing fanatics, and there's a very strong correlation. And they love to come to this region. And we have an extraordinary team of gillies and guides here. We have a fishery manager. So we can cater for anybody from a novice to world-class anglers here. We've got a clay pigeon shooting ground that's here. We've got falconry. Now, a number of places around the country have falconry. It's extraordinary heritage that's often attached to these type of buildings. Our guys are particularly passionate about it. It's a wonderful educational experience.
Well, I think Monfalcone is known as a very romantic house, and it's immersed in the most beautiful 100-acre estate. I'm not sure which is the nicest, the stunning house that was built in 1876 or the stunning grounds. It is really hard to choose between the two, and it was so beautifully built by Franklin Fuller. Some of the trees on the grounds here are up to 300 years old. It's not something you could recreate easily. So in the old house, which was built in 1876, we have 5 beautiful suites. The proportions are stunning. I mean, when they built in those days, they really did build them properly. We talk about walk-in closets now. They had them back then. They're just stunning. The bathroom is bigger than most people's sitting rooms. And then in the new part of the hotel, we have another 28 rooms, beautifully appointed. And then we have 30 lodges on the property, which are just perfect for families, for golfers, for the fishermen. And then the hotel itself is more of your romantic getaway. And it's just such a stunning house for a wedding. Of course, it was built as a wedding gift.
So into the future, well, it's hard to predict, obviously, given this COVID environment. It's so unpredictable, but put it this way, the fact that we're open is a huge step in the right direction. I'm very optimistic about it, I have to say. And I can't wait and look forward to welcoming everybody back. You know.
Mount Falcon attracts visitors from all over the world, including Hollywood stars Jamie Dornan, John Hamm, Emily Blunt, Bill Murray and many more. Also a welcome visitor to Mount Falcon has been the President of the United States of America, Joe Biden. The National Museum of Ireland Country Life is located in Turlock Village outside of Castlebar, situated alongside the stately home of the Fitzgerald family that dates back to the 1860s.
For 350 years, this estate was home to the Fitzgerald family. The Fitzgeralds were a very powerful family who came to Ireland in 1169 with the Norman invasions. They became very powerful in the east and southwest of the country, but in the Cromwellian conquest, a branch of the family lost their holdings at Kilkenny and they were resettled in County Mayo and they got the Turlock estate. So they were banished here to Turla and this was not a bad resettlement for them here on this estate. At its height, their estate here was 8,500 acres. The Fitzgerald's lifestyle here in the big house was made possible because most of their estate was farmed in small parcels by tenants who paid rent to the landlord. So the Fitzgeralds lived on various homes throughout their estate over the 350 years. But in the 1860s, the house that we're in today, Turlock Park House, Charles Lionel Fitzgerald commissioned a celebrated architect of the time, Thomas Newenham Dean, to build this house for them, to design and build this house. The house can best be described as high Victorian Gothic style. It's very striking as you approach it. And at the time that the house was developed, Charles Lionel also made a lot of improvements to the grounds and redeveloped the gardens in the Victorian style. Successive generations of the Fitzgerald family lived on the estate until actually the 1990s. And the estate was purchased at that time by Mayo County Council. They purchased the house and they purchased 40 acres of parkland, woodland and Victorian gardens. At around the same time, the National Museum of Ireland, Ireland's premier cultural institution, was looking for somewhere to house and display Ireland's national folklife collection. They looked at a number of locations around Ireland and eventually they selected Mayo, and that's how the National Museum of Ireland came to be here in County Mayo.
We're here in Turlock Park and this is the home of the National Museum of Ireland Country Life. But we're here in a purpose-built museum and we have a purpose-built store and a beautiful Turlock house is on the site as well. It's a 25-acre site, but it's home to this National Museum. And the collection that we have is the Irish Folklife collection, and it's illustrating the rural life and normal lives of ordinary people in rural Ireland. It's just all aspects of life, from like the way we ate, the way we worked, what we wore, and how people lived. But we're kind of looking at maybe 2 generations of what's on display is probably how people lived 2 generations ago. And that's the essence of the collection. It's probably around the 1900s, 1950s, and it's before this traditional way of life ended, when people embraced modernity and just there was so much change in the countryside. So it's kind of pre that we're looking at. So whatever happens in terms of traditional life, celebrations have always been really, really important. And we have a wonderful section on all the quarters of the calendar year. So from the Bridget's Day to May time to Lunasa and to Halloween and all the festivals in between. So there's lovely objects associated with that really bring a lot of nostalgia back to so many people. Besides the craftspeople and the basket makers, the tinsmith, we have a wonderful collection of the home objects. So everything associated with that traditional fireside. Like before people put in the range, they used to have the crane and the fire, and all the ironwork was there that you hung your pots from.
The National Museum here is one of the few places in Mayo which you can feel completely transported back in time.
And really, there's multiple visitor experiences combined into one here on this site. You have the Victorian gardens, you have woodland, parkland, an award-winning playground, recently named the best playground in Ireland. We have a cafe on site which is in a wonderful setting of the courtyard and the former stable block and service wing of the house.
The National Museum of Country Life boasts one of the Green Flag Awards winning gardens, which includes many rare trees, shrubs and fine broadleaf mature trees.
There's many beautiful features in this garden. It's 29 acres currently and had been previously 10,000 acres. Mayo County Council look after the grounds. The Victorian gardens, as I said, were designed in 1864 with the house. It contains many beautiful features, including our beautiful conservatory, terraces, a man-made lake, beautiful vinery designed by Richard Turner. He was the designer of Kew Gardens glass houses and the National Botanic Gardens Ireland. We also have the remains of a little boathouse and 3 picnic islands, because in the time of the Fitzgeralds here, they put in a sluice gate on the local Castlebar River, and the lake and the river, the Turlough actually is what it was, and the river all became one. And on that they built 3 islands. And the family in the summertime would have walked down to the little boathouse and taken the boat out onto the lake and have their picnics on the islands. Very much a feature of Victorian times.
Visitors can enjoy all that Turlough House Park has to offer free of charge. Join us in part 2. Westport House is situated in the heart of the town of Westport. The house was built in the 1730s by the descendants of the famous pirate queen Grace O'Malley, whose castle stood on this very spot in the 1500s.
My name is Catherine Connolly and I am supervisor here at Westport House. I'm also the historian and the care of the collection. I also do the tours here, and we do lots of different things with afternoon teas, dinners, functions, weddings, all kinds of things here at the house. So it's an amazing, beautiful, almost 300-year-old house built in 1730 by the Brown family. We have 30 rooms open to the public over 3 floors, and it is a self-guided tour. We also have a wonderful audio tour that you can download on your phone for free, and it helps you go around the house as well and view the different rooms and get all the information about the rooms as you're walking around as well. This is on a 400-acre estate. We have beautiful gardens, walking trails, 3.6 kilometre walking trails all through the forest here. You go around by the lake, you can see all the wildlife and nature here. We also have a caravan and camping park. We have a children's pirate adventure park here as well, and of course Hotel Westport is on the estate too. So we've it all going on here. It's a wonderful place to come, and you can spend a full day here. I want to tell you a little bit about the history of the house. The house was built in 1730 by the Brown family, but our history actually goes way back to the 1500s to a lady called Grace O'Malley Gráinne. So Grace O'Malley was a wonderful woman, a ferocious woman, born in 1530, 200 years before the house was built, and this was owned by the O'Malley clan. So this all belonged to the O'Malleys. It was known as the territory of Oul. She had 5 castles all around Clew Bay. And Westport House is actually built on the ruins of one of those castles. And because of that, we have amazing dungeons downstairs that date back 500 years, and they are well worth a visit when you come to the house. Again, you can go in and pretend that you're a prisoner going back a few years, so it's an amazing spot as well. So in 1730, the house was built by the Brown family, who actually are direct descendants of Grace O'Malley. The first Brown that came here was a man called Colonel John Brown, and he married Grace O'Malley's great-great-granddaughter Maud Burke, and that's how the family are still today connected to Grace O'Malley through that marriage. So the Brown family built the house in 1730, and they became the Marquess of Sligo by signing the Act of Union, or supporting the Act of Union of 1800. And really the wealth expanded then. They owned probably up to about 115,000 acres all around this area, going into Delphi, and they owned all of that at that time. So that would have been really the pinnacle of the wealth. There was over 50 people working just out in the gardens alone. It was a working farm. There was a beautiful, incredible walled garden here at the time as well. So it was a hive of activity. And of course, the walled garden would have supported the house here. So the house then went through many different changes. all the way up. It was owned up by the Browns up until 2017, where unfortunately, due to financial situation, the Browns had to sell the house. But we are incredibly lucky that we have been bought by another local family here, the Hugheses. They own Hotel Westport and Port West Clothing Company, which is a global, very successful company. And they are delighted to be part of this community. So if you're ever in Westport in County Mayo, please come and visit us. We'd love to see you all. We have beautiful formal rooms here. We have a wonderful library that I'm in now. There's also an incredible drawing room, a long gallery, an immaculate large dining room, beautiful ladies' room as well. We have upstairs, you can see the beautiful bedrooms. And the most jewel in our crown would be our incredible Chinese room with wallpaper that's over 200 years old. It really is incredible and a very special, unique part of your visit here to the house. We'd love to see you all, so come and visit us.
Overlooking Lough Corrib, Ashford Castle is renowned for its warm Irish hospitality, exceptional dining experiences and an unrivaled range of estate activities, all set within the magnificent 350-acre Ashford estate.
Hello, how are you? My name is Paddy Costello from Newport, County Mayo. I'm here 44 years in Ashford Castle and you're all very welcome to Ashford Castle.
My name is Shane Brett. I am from the town of Claremorris. I've been very fortunate to be part of the team here at Ashford for the past 6 years. Only 6 years, but hoping to be here for another 60. And we're here in the Connacht room, which would have been the dining room of the Guinness family, where they would have met every day over afternoon tea to discuss the happenings on the estate that day. And we've continued that tradition with Lady Ardlawn's afternoon tea in here on a daily basis. But even before the Guinness family, Ashford has an incredibly rich and varied history. So it dates back to 1228 with the de Burgo family who built the original castle. And in the 18th century, the O'More and Brown family established the French chateau part of the castle. In the 19th century then, the Guinness family purchased the estate and they really developed the estate almost to what you see now and really developed roads, planted trees and forests on the grounds. And in 1939, Ashford was established as a luxury hotel by Noel Huggard. And during his tenure here, the famous Quiet Man movie was filmed here with John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, directed by John Ford. In 1970 then, John A. Mulcahy extended the estate again and built the golf course, which is still here to this day. And more recently then in 2013, the Tolman family of Red Carnation Hotels purchased the estate and they've invested upwards of $100 million in the property and really restored the castle to its former glory. As I mentioned, we're here in the Connacht room, which would have been the dining room of the Guinness house, but the Tolman family have created some amazing new additions, which I'm going to show you now.
Recent additions to the Ashford experience include the award-winning spa, the billiards room and cinema.
So another popular addition to the castle is this amazing 32-seat cinema, again added during the restoration of the castle, and guests love to come up here and watch the Quiet Man movie of course, but there's a whole host of other movies that we show here throughout the day, and you can enjoy popcorn, sweets, you can have a drink up here if you'd like as well.
If you enjoy the outdoors, the Ashford estate has so much to offer, including falconry, golf and horse riding, or simply take a walk through these stunning gardens.
My name is Martin Slattery. I'm charged with the maintenance of all the gardens and golf course and the grounds. I've been working on the grounds of Ashford for over 30 years. What can one say about Ashford? From your entrance to the main gate, currently you pass by the bluebells in flower in the forest, through the golf course. You arrive at the 9th green and you see the castle possibly for the first time, overlooking the lake, and as they call it, it's the oh my god corner because it's kind of a wow. The wall garden contains a large amount of perennial plants and shrubs. Also there's a very nice living hornbeam tunnel that you walk through under to access the exit gate, and it also contains a vegetable area and some fruit bushes. The whole estate takes in 350 acres. Of that, there's 100 acres of formally maintained gardens and golf course, and the other 250 is natural hardwood forestry. The Guinness family laid out the structure of the existing formal gardens back in the late 1800s, and Thanks to the current owners, Mr. and Mrs. Tolman, we've been able to restore and embellish the grounds to a much higher level than previously seen.
The wine cellars at Ashford Castle offer private wine tastings and wonderful wine dinners in the secret passageways of the castle, which were unearthed during the renovations.
We now have a state-of-the-art wine cellar with the most amazing wines from all over the world. This is our red wine cellar. We have champagne here, we have white wine over here, we have tasting rooms over here. So you can come down every day and you can do a tasting, right? And you can do a tasting from 80 euros up to 1,000 euros. So it's taken us 34 years. It's taken me 34 years to realise my vision for here. It only took Mr. Tolman a couple of minutes, but we now have the most amazing guest amenity for wine.
I'm Paula Carroll, and I am privileged to be the Director of Sales and Marketing at this wonderful, wonderful, majestic place that you've now had an insight into what makes Ashford one of the world's leading hotels, and the only one to be voted Forbes 5-star. I know you've enjoyed the tour with my colleagues, and may I tell you, that is only half the story, because the main thing that Ashford is world renowned for is its hospitality, given by a professional, passionate and proud team of people. We talk about the 800 years of history, but believe you me, there's over 1,800 years of service. And every single department in this hotel has in excess of 80 years of service just in each department, and that is what sets us apart. Equally, I'm very proud to say that today you had actually over 100 years between the four of us who've been here. Thank you for coming. We look forward to welcoming you.
Captain Pat Luskin of Coral Cruises operates boat trips on board the Isle of Innisfree from Ashford Castle.
This was one of the great houses of Mayo. Right here, and this is why it was built here, because of the travel by water. You'll find a lot of these great big old houses of Mayo were built on waterways because of the travel by water, and they had an abundance of fresh water for themselves as well. So the de Burgos would have settled here for that reason. The Guinnesses, very importantly, they could get from their home in Dublin, which was out in Raheny, St. Anne's Park in Raheny. They'd make their way into Houston Station in Dublin. They'd make their way from there to Kent Station in Galway on the train. That would have taken about 3.5 to 4 hours to come from Raheny to Galway. Then they had a 3.5-hour boat ride right here to the front door of Ashford Castle. And it's no wonder the Guinnesses built their house into Ashford Castle.
That brings us
again
to the end of our two-part documentary on Mayo's wonderful historic houses and gardens. Now, for more information, visit mayo.ie/visit.